Good evening, guys. So this evening, I'm going to take a quick look at foreigner ID cards in Rwanda, what they are, how you get one, and some of the perks that come along with it, because there are one or two. Now, after that, most of you are going to clear off because that's probably all the information that you need. But if you stick around, I'm probably going to have a little bit of a waffle about ID cards in general. Right, so starting off, what is a foreigner ID card? So, a foreigner ID card looks a bit like this. It's a form of photographic identification. In Rwanda, it is compulsory to carry an ID card. And so a foreigner ID card is the same as a national ID card, but for foreigners. That's pretty much it. Now, you are eligible to get one of these, and you must get one of these once you receive your residency permit. So, in most countries, you call this a working visa. Here it's called a work permit. Same thing, it means that you have entered on a foreign passport, but you have a stamp in your passport that allows you to stay and work in Rwanda. Now, usually that's for 1 or 2 years, and the minute that you get that stamp, you are then considered resident in Rwanda. And once you're resident, you need your foreigner ID card. So essentially, it's like a green card. And actually that's what it used to be. So when I very first arrived here over a decade and a half ago, your green card was literally a piece of green card folded over. And I was in my 20s when I first arrived, and I'd only ever heard the term green card applied to America, so getting your American green card. And so when I actually got a green piece of card, I was like looking at, it has evolved a bit since then, and it is now a fully laminated photographic ID card. So that's what it is. How do you get one? Well, let me show you. Okay, so what you want to do is to head over to Irembo, which is basically Rwanda's government gateway, where you can pay for different services. I'll leave the link below. When you get here, just go to the top right and switch to English if it isn't already. Then come to the search bar and just type ID. And below, you'll see this little tab here for immigration and emigration, foreigner ID card. Click on foreigner ID card. Now just come over to the drop-down menu. If this is your first time applying for a foreigner ID card, click apply for foreigner identification card. If you've lost your foreigner identification card, go for the one above, replace foreigner identification card. Now, you can only apply for your foreigner identification card once you've got the work permit stamped in your passport. So don't try to get your foreigner identification card before you've got your work permit and your visa approved. So here it says that it should take 7 days to receive your foreigner ID card. They should send you an SMS message or possibly an email to let you know it's ready. It costs 5,000 francs and it's provided by the Director of Immigration and Emigration. So that's where you're going to go to collect your ID card. And then once you've got all of that ready, you just hit the apply button. Once you've clicked apply, it'll ask you to fill out your name and your passport number. And that should be all that you need to link the visa in your passport to your ID card and to get it approved. Because if you've already got your work permit approved, then they will approve your ID card. So then you click next. Now, I'm not going to go through with this application, but once you click next, it should take you through to a summary of what you're applying for and the information that you've given, and then it should take you through to your payment options. You can usually pay using mobile money, a bank transfer if you have a local account, or you can also usually do things with a credit or debit card nowadays. Okay, so what are the perks? Well, there are 3 major ones that I have used. The first one, and the really cute one, is that if you have got a foreigner ID card, you get money off things. So if you're visiting a museum, so if you're going to Nyanza Mwami Palace or the Kant Museum, or if you're going to the national parks, like you're going into Nyungwe or Akagera, you get a discount. Just for being a resident, which I think is really nice. So it's not usually very much. It's usually, maybe 1,000 off a museum, 1,000 francs. or, a small discount off a national park, but it's still a discount, and that's nice. So in that respect, it's kind of like a loyalty card. So thank you for living in Rwanda, which I think is really sweet. The second one, and probably the most useful one, is when you arrive at Kigali International Airport and you've got the big queue for arrivals to go through customs. On the right-hand side are some metal gates. Now, for many, 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 many years, they never worked. But I just returned from a trip around Europe, and for the first time when I arrived, those gates were working. And all I needed was my national ID card. And I put that down, and the gates opened, and I completely skipped the arrivals queue, which was absolutely fantastic. So Rwandan nationals and foreigners with residency in Rwanda can do that, and I think that's fantastic. Now, the gates might not always be working, but when they are, go and try it. So the last one is actually a really interesting one. As long as I'm resident in Rwanda, I'm living in Rwanda, then I am within the East Africa travel community. And this is an agreement between Rwanda, Kenya and Uganda that you can travel between these countries and you don't pay any further entry visa fees. So I can travel overland to Uganda because we're right next door, or I can hop on a plane to Kenya, and when I arrive, I don't need to pay to enter that country. Provided when I leave Rwanda, I ask at the airport or the border crossing for a little piece of paper that shows that I've just come from Rwanda and that I'm resident here. And when I show that on arrival in Kenya or Uganda, that's fine, I can go through. Now, there's another little bit to this, that if you are resident in Rwanda and you've got your little residency card, you can also apply for something called a sepg. It doesn't quite roll off the tongue, sepg. And what that is it's a cardboard sheet, or it was the last time that I got one. It's like a sports certificate you get in school, and it allows you multiple entry into Eastern DRC and Burundi. So you could go to Bujumbura or you could go into Eastern DRC, not into the interior of DRC, so not to somewhere like the capital Kinshasa, but you can go into the sort of Goma region, which maybe not the best holiday destination at the moment, but I've been over there for work and I've been over there to Ijwe Island for travel, and both times I use a sepg. Because without the sepg, I would be paying about $150, $160 for a visa for DRC. But with the sepg, that costs me 10,000 Rwandan francs, so less than $10. It's multiple entry and it lasts me 3 months. For nationals of Rwanda, it lasts for 6 months. For foreigners with your ID card, it lasts you for the 3 months. But that means that you can cross over into Eastern DRC or down into Burundi at no extra fee, which is really, really interesting, quite useful. So there you go. Those are the 3 top things that you get with a residency card. Now, most of you can toddle along now because that's probably everything you really wanted to know. But I am just going to keep waffling for a couple of minutes. Stick around or don't. What happens if you don't have your ID card? Well, this is an interesting story. So in all of my years living here, nobody has ever approached me and demanded to see my ID card. Nobody's ever asked for it. I have sometimes pulled it out if I need to go into government buildings or sort of large, important buildings, and they want to see my ID. This is usually in my wallet. It's easy to pull out and I can show them. I've used it to open bank accounts before, but nobody has ever demanded it of me, which is interesting because, I have a friend over in Kibuye in Western Province, and he's Rwandan, and he says that he gets asked for his ID card all the time. So I don't know, maybe he just looks suspicious. The other thing that I have seen is there has never been a situation where I've needed to show ID, where my British driving licence or my passport wouldn't suffice. But I actually prefer the ID card because if I lose my passport, I am shafted. If I lose my driving licence, that is massively inconvenient. But if I lose my ID card, I just pay another 5,000 and get it renewed. Although the only time it isn't often accepted is if you're doing sort of banking or money transfer. So if you're going to Western Union some money somewhere, or I think there's another one called Dahabshil, something like that, or Unimoney, they want to see your passport. They're not interested in your foreigner ID card. Now, entertaining thing that happened to me when I was re-entering the country, and I went through the little flappy gates for the first time, is that's when I noticed that actually my ID card is 3 years out of date. It expired in 2020. And the gates at the airport still worked. And I think that the gates at the airport still work because along the bottom you have a unique ID card, and on the back you've got a little barcode that I think links to your specific profile or your specific file at immigration. And so I think so long as immigration know that you have got a current and active visa, a working permit, then it doesn't really matter if the actual card itself is out of date. So story with this is that I did try to renew it, and I tried to renew it back in April this year. And the way that you renew it through Irembo doesn't always work. And I'm going to devote a separate video to Irembo because I was going to talk about it extensively here. And then I realized, you know what? This is a whole other episode. But Irembo doesn't always work. Sometimes you submit something and it just disappears into the ether. So I actually submitted for a new renewed ID card back in actually the end of March, and as of the 6th of April I have heard nothing. So I've never got this, and I refuse to pay again basically because principle. So yeah, but I'll do a different video about that. But don't be upset if you've got an out-of-date ID card, because nobody has ever looked at this and gone, but it's out of date. Nobody's done that, and even the entry gates at the airport don't care for me. Maybe after watching this video, the entry gates at the airport might change their minds. So I'm sorry to anybody if they try and use an expired card after that and it doesn't work. That's probably my fault. But at the moment, it seems fine. So I just thought I'd tell you about that. As a British person, ID cards are hugely controversial. They pretty much screwed our government from 2006 to 2011. So the British government tried to introduce compulsory ID cards in the UK, and that went down like a lead balloon. Basically, everybody in the UK just looked at it and went like, nah, mate. Nah, we ain't doing that. So we didn't. So in the UK, compulsory ID was introduced during the First World War and then scrapped afterwards because it was so unpopular. And then it was brought in again during the Second World War just to make sure nobody was a spy, because clearly a spy could not possibly fake an ID card. And so, yeah, that happened. And then they were scrapped again because they were hugely unpopular. Then between 2006 to 2011, the British government spent millions of pounds trying to introduce a national ID database, and then they ended up having to burn all of the hard drives because nobody was having it. There's kind of like a thing in the UK that people are just really cantankerous about the idea of being forced to carry an ID card, and yet at the same point, like, we all give away our information online every day. So it's kind of, I don't know why we're like that. So in the UK, it's kind of seen as a bit of a threat to civil liberties that we should be forced to carry an ID card, so we don't. But instead, if you want to open a bank account or you want to prove who you are, you need a form of photographic ID. So we either use our driving license or we use our passports, because most people in the UK have got one of those two things. But there are people who haven't. You know, I've got a friend who hasn't got a passport and hasn't got a driving license. And so it's got no real form of photographic ID. And if there isn't an optional ID card, how do you prove who you are? So I think it's getting harder and harder nowadays to kind of escape this kind of identification system, especially now that things like passports are biometrically linked. So if I'm traveling through an airport, I use my fingerprints. You know, you stand at the gates and you stare into a camera and it knows who you are, which on the one hand makes things really, really convenient, but on the other hand is slightly creepy. But when I was kind of like prepping for this video, I got curious and I went off to see, because I assume like the whole of Europe must be like Britain. You know, the whole of Europe's got to be like Britain. You know, nobody's going to be carrying an ID card, are they? And according to Wiki, 14 countries in the EU have got compulsory ID systems, and 9 of them have optional ID cards, which kind of blew my mind because that seems really, really high. So yeah, I don't know. I just found that really interesting. So it kind of like makes Rwanda and the ID cards that we carry here the norm globally. And apparently the countries that resist ID cards the strongest tend to be the Anglophone ones. So apparently Australia was like Britain. They tried to introduce them and Australia just went, but it's interesting. And I didn't know that before I started talking about all of this. So let me know. I mean, does your country have ID cards? Does it not have ID cards? I mean, I don't feel bad about having this really. It was a bit weird when I first got here and I was kind of given an ID card and told to carry it at all times because the British part of me was like, why? You know, no. But now it's just like, I quite like it because they get renewed every few years. It's, you know, it's nice. It's like a bit of history for being here. I like the fact it gets you money off things. I like the fact I can skip the queue at the airport. And I don't think I've given any more information to this database than I've given to Facebook or, you know, Twitter or anything online like that. I think people were mostly very, very upset about the whole idea back in the days when we had this possibly erroneous delusion of the right to privacy and anonymity. I can't even say that. You know, I think that has been blown out the water in the past few years that we have anything like that. But I don't know. It's interesting. Let me know what you think. If you've got any more questions about national ID cards or just about life in Rwanda in general, drop them in the comments below and I will try to get back to you.